Hey guys, we're going to be covering some macroeconomic models today, specifically the ISMP model, topic A. So, what is the purpose of this model? Essentially, it's to help us understand the business cycle, so the booms and recessions in an economy, and really just determine why the real GDP changes in the short run, so those fluctuations. A key assumption of this, as follows from our classes earlier, is that prices and wages are sticky in the short run. So just a cool note there that the SRAS curve, the short run aggregate supply curve, is horizontal. So what does this model consist of? Essentially, it's three different curves: the IS curve, the MP, and the Phillips curve, which we'll be covering in the next topic. The IS curve represents the goods market in equilibrium, and the MP curve represents the central bank's monetary policy. So the IS curve is, to boil it down, essentially more so the demand curve. It shows the relationships between real interest rates and real GDP. And MP curve is essentially the monetary policy set by the central banks. A really important point about this model is that it's in equilibrium where at the point where IS and MP intersect and the output gap is zero. That last point about the output gap being zero is extremely important because if you are not in equilibrium, if there is an output gap, positive or negative, that means that you're not in equilibrium, and that means that you're either in a recession or a boom at that point. So equilibrium in the goods market. So we're going to start off with aggregate expenditure and the total goods supplied. So that's your AE and your Y. So aggregate expenditure is simply just the total spending in an economy, and you can see the formula below. Total goods supplied, also in this case known as real GDP, is essentially just the value of all goods supplied or produced. And there you can see the formula. So the goods market is in equilibrium when aggregate expenditure is equal to that total goods supplied or that real GDP. And the difference, the reason that I can use total goods supplied or real GDP is because the real GDP represents the value of those goods produced. So moving on. Just part two, we're just covering this and saying that changes in aggregate expenditure impact total goods supplied. So AE impacts Y. Well, how does that happen? So when AE is less than Y, that means that your aggregate expenditure is less than your income or your real GDP. So that means that not all goods produced were purchased. So when that happens, inventory is going to pile up, so it's going to increase. Employment and total goods supplied are going to decrease. And a good way to think about this is that you are in a recession. When AE is greater than Y, that means that spending is greater than the amount of goods produced, as opposite to the initial. Inventory is going to decrease because you're purchasing more than you have produced, right? So your stock is going to decrease. While in this case, employment and total goods supplied is going to increase. Now this would be a boom in an economy. So a really important note too is that changes in the total goods supplied Y there can impact the aggregate expenditure through changes in consumption, and we can see that through the consumption function. Moving on. So the investment savings curve, or IS curve. So what does it represent? As I said earlier, it shows a combination of real interest rates and real GDP when the goods market is in equilibrium, so when that AE is equal to Y. It's shifted by any factors that influence your aggregate expenditure beyond a movement or a change in real interest rate. So just a change in real interest rate is just a movement along the IS curve. So another important point here, as it's bolded, these are demand shocks. Any demand shock will shift the IS curve. So demand shocks can be anything, but in this instance, they are essentially the consumers being optimistic or pessimistic about the state of the economy. And now finally, the IS curve is sloped downwards because real GDP is inversely related to real interest rates. So that's just simply saying that as real interest rates increase, real GDP decreases and vice versa. So let's move on to our example here. So given the recent events and the conflicts in Ukraine, energy security has been a major issue throughout the European Union, and some of the countries there have been seeing their energy bills rise by 300% or more. So given these current events, citizens have been extremely pessimistic about the state of the economy and where it's going to go in the future. And we're going to use this to show what the impacts to the IS curve are, real interest rates, and output gap in the next slide. So as you can see, our little graph here is just a helpful I guess a resource. We can just visualize it a little bit easier. So first off, a decrease in consumer confidence is a negative demand shock. And as I said earlier, any demand shock will shift the IS curve, in this case, in a negative way. So it's going to shift the IS curve to the left. So in this one, the real interest rate is not impacted because monetary policy is set out by the central banks, and it hasn't been, no monetary policy has been implemented at this point. And finally, shifting the IS curve to the left has caused a negative output gap. So that means that the economy is not producing what it should be, or not as efficiently as it could be. So in this case, a negative output gap means a recession. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.